Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Charles from the channel Books on Serial, and I'm having a really special guest on my channel today. I have Mara from Books Like Whoa. If you haven't heard of her channel or you haven't subscribed, she basically covers almost every single genre underneath the rainbow. She does her classics, she does her nonfiction, and today we're going to be talking about how to get into nonfiction and fantasy audiobooks. As you guys know, I'm a romance reader, so I'm nowhere near qualified to talk about this topic. I will give you recommendations that are basically romance with like a little sprinkle of historical, fantasy or nonfiction, but it's really just romance. But how are you doing today, Mara?
I'm good. I had my first latte in the last 14 months, so that was an exciting milestone. So, sunshine and bird singing, we're doing okay.
Yeah, that's good. So how did you get into fantasy and nonfiction audiobooks?
So, fantasy, I'm definitely still feeling my way through. I feel like it was sort of a function of expediency, is how I kind of started stumbling into it. But nonfiction, I really found my groove with that coming out of grad school because I had to read so much nonfiction with my eyeballs, the traditional way. And I think I really like nonfiction, but I think I needed to find a different way to get into it. And I started having a commute again. So I found, especially because I feel like nonfiction audio reads a lot like podcasts, and I love podcasts. It was sort of a natural progression for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting because I think I maybe have listened to like a few on audio. Fantasy is usually much harder, especially the audios tend to be a lot longer.
Yeah.
I'm bad remembering character names, like plots, anything that happens in a book list. I could be in a book chat and they're like, "Oh, remember what happened on page 20?" I'm like, "What happened?" Or
Yeah.
you pick out these little things because I'm like, that completely just went over my head. I'm just trying to get the bare bones of the story. That's what rereads are for.
Yeah, and I guess it also maybe depends on what you read fantasy for. Like, I could see that fantasy or sci-fi, if you are a very world-building focused reader, or I know that there's some fantasy authors like Sanderson or Susan Dennard come to mind who are kind of like puzzle box writers. Like, part of the enjoyment is trying to figure out what's going on and really get into all the clues. Whereas I'm more of just I'm there for the vibes in fantasy. So I'm not that pressed if I can't remember every single character or every single detail. I'm there just to kind of get swept away. So I can definitely, I think if you're somebody who wants to really remember every single minutia of world building, I could see why audio would be a little trickier.
Yeah, and definitely talking about a little bit of nonfiction. My problem with nonfiction, I read a couple that were really good, but sometimes it reads like a textbook. And some nonfiction just puts me to sleep like no other. And on audio, I'm like 3.5.
Yeah.
Let's get through this. I don't really care about all the historical details. Just give me the A story. I just need the gist of it. And I
Yeah.
can be like, okay, I'd like what you did there.
Yeah. Well, I listen to audio. I always listen to audio on at least 2 speed because I just can't pay attention otherwise.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's too, I think that's a big mistake people make especially in nonfiction, because if it gets slow, it definitely feels like a professor droning on. But I think also in nonfiction, there's definitely a range in terms of what kind of nonfiction is available. So there is more academic nonfiction and drier nonfiction, basically. But especially, I would say in the last 10 years, there is a lot of what I would describe as narrative nonfiction, which is designed to read much more like fiction. So I think if you're trying to get into nonfiction audio or just nonfiction in general, seeking out that flavor and or finding a topic that you're genuinely really interested in and want to learn about, I think is kind of how you can get into it.
Get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's interesting that I never heard that term narrative nonfiction, but that's a
Hmm.
nonfiction that of the ones I've read more like that.
Yeah.
Or I don't even call it memoir nonfiction, if you can call it that.
Hmm.
Between the World and Me, that was like the
Yep.
one nonfiction book where I couldn't listen to it on audio. I had to like buy the paperback because like the way he writes, I'm like, okay, this does not work. This not does not translate in audio when you have a sentence that's a
Mm.
paragraph long and
Yeah.
you have multiple interrupters and you're saying like 20 different things. I was like, am I
Yeah.
writing a paper while I feel like I should be like writing a paper like documenting all your arguments while I'm reading this book because I'm like, oh, that's amazing. That's an amazing quote. Oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing. I have to use that somehow in some
Does he
form of
read that
conversation.
audio? Does he read that audiobook?
I think he does.
Okay. See,
I think he
that
does.
surprises me then, because usually I find if the author reads the audiobook, they
Hmm.
read it. It's even better than if you just read it on the page because they're reading
Yeah.
it in their own voice and like you can really hear where they wanted.
Hmm.
So that surprises me because usually that's a good route to go if it's available. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And like I have to say about your two-time listening speed, since I am the 3.5 listening speed guru, I can't get it. Like maybe that's why I miss 90% of the details in any fantasy or nonfiction that I
Yeah.
read. Whereas romance just works for me perfectly. Like I don't need to know about the details of your past. Do you guys have good chemistry? Is there banter? And I know the ending, so I'm like, okay, I
Yeah.
can be okay with missing 80% of what's going on in the
Yeah.
story. Because I need that 20%. I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think yeah. I mean, I listen to Read Me Romance. I listen to that
Hmm.
podcast with all of the audio. And I can listen to that one, I think, on 2.5 or 2.75. But
Hmm.
I struggle much beyond that to really,
Mm.
it just sounds like chipmunks to me. I can't listen that quickly. But I mean, I know everybody has their own listening speed, you know?
It's okay. I talked to narrators and authors, and they have both shamed me for my 3.5. It's very awkward
Yeah.
when that question comes up, and they're like 1 to 1.5. I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I need to speed y'all up to 3.5. I can't.
Yeah. Well, I listen to podcasts at 1.5. Like that's a pretty
Hmm.
comfortable listening speed to me. Anything slower than that at this point just feels I listen to my own podcast at 1.5. Like I can't even listen to my own voice at a normal rate. So,
That's great. And I also wanted to ask you, where do you get a lot of your nonfiction slash fantasy audiobooks from? Do you get them from the library? Do you do Hoopla? Or do you like do like
yeah.
the buy the discounted ebook and get the discounted audiobook price? Like,
I should use Hoopla more. I for whatever reason just have never put in the time to figure like I couldn't figure out how to make it work on my phone and I just gave up. I use like order of operations is Libby. So library is always my primary,
mm-hmm,
source. And my library is also great about if you ask them to get things, they almost always will get it. So
mm-hmm,
library, and then I have Scribd. So they have a great audiobook collection. And then I do have an Audible account.
mm-hmm,
Um, Mostly what I use that for is authors who I want to buy their book when it comes out,
mm-hmm,
but I don't, it's nonfiction probably,
mm-hmm,
and I don't want to buy the physical book. I want to listen to it. So
mm-hmm.
that's sort of my like order of operations.
Okay. That's like I appreciate that because that's really detailed. I'm like super chaotic. I have like audiobooks on like Authors Direct and then like Chirp and then like Libby and then like Hoopla and then I forget
Oh,
where I bought an audiobook from, so I end up buying a second copy from another retailer because it was on sale. I'm like I'm just a
yeah.
mess. I'm
It's
just a mess.
I can't I can't do that because I would never be able to keep track of where it all like that's the I don't love being so locked into the Amazon ecosystem, but at
Hmm.
this point it's like that's where all of my ebooks are, that's where all of
Yep.
my audiobooks are, and like someday I probably should just take the plunge and do something different, but for now I'm
Yeah.
just I enjoy the simplicity of knowing it's all in one
It's all
place.
that's true. Like I tried using Apple Books for one, trying to see if I can switch over, and it
Yeah.
became way too difficult because I would go like, I have like thousands of books in my on my Amazon e-reader, So I
Yeah.
have to like, always go back and check. I'm like, did I buy that book on
Yeah.
this platform? But then Amazon gives you the whisper sync for the audio, so I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. I
dang you,
mean,
Amazon.
yeah, I don't love being so locked into them, but I just have sort of there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, so I'm just like, this is my unethical
Yep. It's
moment.
just a price we have to pay.
Yeah.
Like it would break my heart to cancel my Kindle Unlimited as a romance reader. That would
I
hurt.
don't know if I yeah, I don't know if I could. I love, yeah, I mean, that's my Ruby Dixon source. So,
Hey, you got your Ruby Dixon, I have my Jessica Kane.
oh
Like
my
that's
God, I
my
love Jessica Kane. Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Jessica
I was like
Kane, Ella Good. I got that whole little
the whole
group
little
of
circle of
them.
your novella authors. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, they release something, it's on
They keep me
KU,
blessed every
download.
week. They got somebody new. I'm just like, okay, great. Yep.
And talking about nonfiction and fantasy, do you prefer reading them or listening to them? If you didn't
Nonfiction,
have any.
yeah, nonfiction
Mm-hmm,
I definitely prefer listening to. Like I'm
mm-hmm,
to the point where that I can process nonfiction audibly much
mm-hmm,
better than I can reading. I've been working on a
mm,
video essay recently, and I've been having to do more reading with my eyeballs for
mm-hmm,
it. And it was a reminder to me of like, I just don't like this as much. So I do like, I guess for what I would describe as literary nonfiction, I still do like that
mm-hmm,
in reading with my eyeballs.
mm-hmm,
I'm reading The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois right now, and like that I'm
mm-hmm,
enjoying as a physical book.
mm-hmm,
But it's got more of like a literary quality to it. So I don't know, for whatever reason that works. But
mm-hmm,
generally, I would say nonfiction, definitely audio. Fantasy, it's like I'm kind of chaotic, I guess, in terms of what I end up listening to on audio versus with my eyeballs. I think I'm pickier in fantasy with my narrators than I am in any other genre. I don't know why. Like,
mm-hmm,
I'm in general somebody who's not that pressed about a narrator, but in fantasy, it does bother me sometimes. I think, especially because I've noticed in fantasy, they tend to change narrators
mm.
midstream. Like, I was listening to Rick Riordan's Norse trilogy,
Oh,
Magnus
mm-hmm,
Chase,
mm-hmm,
which are really cute. They're really fun. And I
mm-hmm.
liked the first audiobook pretty well. And I was trying to get into the second one. And I was like, I just cannot make progress in this. I don't know why. And then I was like, for whatever reason, was like, is the narrator the same? And I went and looked, and there's a different narrator for every book in that trilogy. And I'm like, well, okay,
That's
that's
why.
why I just like, my brain just wasn't meshing with it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because for me personally, I'm only audio focused and I'm just starting to transition back into like physically reading.
Mm,
And
yeah.
it's been very rough. It's been a rough transition. I feel that's like my privilege talking. I'm gonna 100% acknowledge that I can listen to audiobooks and be like, oh, but it's not on audio.
Yeah.
But I 100% get that. But I would have to say one of the things that I'm more aware of that I see more in fantasy or nonfiction are like the huge paragraphs that are just like tons of information or the big
Like a
dreaded
wall of
blocks of
text.
text.
Yeah.
One book comes to mind. I think it's Spindle by Naomi Novik. It's her
Oh, Spinning Silver?
Rumpelstiltskin, Spinning Silver.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I tried reading that one, and that one does a weird thing where it switches perspectives, and it doesn't
Oh,
tell you
yeah.
who it actually switches to.
Yeah.
So I tried it. I tried it on audio, and I was like, I can't do this. Like now, I don't know what character's head I'm in. So I
Yeah.
tried reading it, and then just reading experience didn't work for me. So like, I'm like a little bit iffy when it comes to fantasy or nonfiction. A lot of times because of the length, and I think a lot of people may feel that. They're
Hmm.
usually 10 plus hours, whereas romance is usually around the 6 to 9 hour mark.
Yeah.
Much more easier commitment.
Yeah.
I've seen like some fantasy like 20, 30 hours on audio, which is a long time to
Yeah,
invest in an audiobook.
it definitely is. Yeah.
But I'm wondering like is it more time efficient to like go to audios and consume them a little bit faster, or if you could read them a little bit
I
faster?
I find that I read fantasy faster than the
Mm,
audio than I can listen to it in audio. I think that there's been some, so like for instance, I'm making my way through the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, and the narrator for one of the like signature characters of that series is legendarily awesome. Like, because the character doesn't have a tongue, so they narrate that really effectively.
Cool.
So while I can't get through it as fast that way, I prefer to listen to the audio because I enjoy that performance. But I find, I do find for fantasy, I can't get through it as quickly. Like if I know, all things being equal, in fantasy, I'd probably rather read it with my eyeballs. But nonfiction, I actually read much quicker in audio than I do with my eyeballs. Like, I think, just in terms of like processing what's being said, I can get through it more quickly. But I do think, like I said, I do think a lot of it comes down to like picking the right book in nonfiction, because I think a lot of times people just kind of go into it because they've heard that, oh, this is a good one. But if it's not a topic that interests you, like, you're not going to get into it. And sometimes I think some nonfiction books I don't know work well as audio, like Eric Larson is one of the like granddaddies of narrative nonfiction. Him and Michael Lewis, I think of as like the two good, like really good starter places for narrative nonfiction. But his most famous book is Devil in the White City. And I do not think that works as audio. Me and my dad listened to that when we were road tripping back, when I was moving back from Canada. And the same thing you were saying, it's a perspective shift constantly in that book between two different groups. And I don't think the narrator signaled when that was happening very well. So we were constantly confused about like, wait, we were in this murder house and now like where are we? Like, I don't know where we are. I thought he was killing this person. Now they're like building this building at the World's Fair. I don't know what's going on. So I don't recommend the audio of that particular book, even though he's a great author. So.
Oh my goodness, that's too funny, because the struggle is real in audio, because people have to realize when you're listening to audio, you don't have the same signifiers on page where you can say like a character name and then you're in that perspective. Like, I do not like guessing when I'm like, okay, whose whose head are we in? What's happening? You know what? because most of the time I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go with it. And hopefully by the time I'm like 90% through the book, it'll make sense. Like, hopefully, like, my brain will catch on to it. So I'm like, we'll see. Let's hope for the best. I'm gonna expect the worst. I'm probably gonna give a horrible review, but let's just try it. Let's just see how this goes.
Give it a go. Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of touch on, why do you think some people tend to shy away from fantasy or nonfiction in general?
I actually think the answer is the same probably for both, which is an intimidation factor. Like, for two different reasons. So for fantasy, I feel like there's so much gatekeeping, like just BS that goes on with fantasy. There's a lot of like, not lovingly, I pejoratively refer to them as fantasy dude bros, who are like, they're, like, this is the right way to be a fantasy reader. And like, you need to have read these books or else you're not a real fantasy reader or whatever. So I think people, and they're just big books. And I just think people feel intimidated by them, either because they're long, because they've been told they have to read certain ones that maybe just don't appeal to them. And there's so much variety now in fantasy in terms of like different kinds of world building and more variety in the stories. And like, I don't know, I just think it's a great time to be a fantasy reader, but I think there's a perception of like, you have to have read Sanderson or Wheel of Time or Malazan or whatever, or else you're not a real fantasy reader. So I think there's that intimidation factor. And then with nonfiction, I think people are intimidated because they potentially have like bad memories from school, or, they think of it almost like homework or whatever. And for that, I think you just really have, like I've been saying, if it's a topic that does not interest you, don't read the book. Like, even if you've heard great things about it, there's a few books that I think the writing is so good it could carry you through. But like, if you don't give a crap about, the history of science, even though The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks is a great narrative nonfiction book, you're not going to be interested in it probably because it's just not a topic that interests you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting about the fantasy comment because as someone who has dabbled in fantasy and trying to find my footing, I feel like everyone pushes me towards you have to read Brandon Sanderson. Like if you want to do it correctly, read Elantris, start at his very first, you are going to love it. And then I hated Elantris. Like I fell asleep while listening to the audio. So I was like, you know what? Everyone's talking about Robert Jordan. Everyone is hyping up this series. Like it's something that I have to read if I want
No.
to really get into fantasy.
Don't.
And I literally got to chapter 3 and I was like, no, thank you.
It's
I was like, I
awful.
can't get through this.
I mean, like, no offense to people who love it, but like that's what I famously said. My eyeballs just rejected. It's just like the writing is terrible, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think too for fantasy as well, they tend to be much thicker books and
Yeah.
tend to be more info dumpy.
Hmm.
Like they go like you have to go through all this world building, and some fantasy authors do it better than others. But I think if you're going from like a contemporary or literary fiction or even urban fantasy a little bit you can get away with. It's a little bit easier to slip into. You
Yeah.
don't have that massive world building that you have to sit through and get through to understand, or you don't have to understand the politics or a magic system. And it seems like there's such a huge investment that you have to make in a series that's a fantasy series, especially if it's like a 5 book long series
Yeah.
versus like a contemporary. I can just pick it up. I don't need to know that much. I don't have to be paying that much attention. I can just go in it. I know the world. It's our world. There's
Yeah.
less of an investment. And then for nonfiction, the topic argument that you bring up is really relevant as well because I think that's one of the more genres where you have to go in with a topic that you actually enjoy.
Yeah.
You can't just try out a sub-genre. Like I can give you historical romance. You can try any historical romance because
Yeah.
it's not really topic dependent unless you just have like hard no's that you don't like to see in
Yeah.
stories. And I feel like nonfiction is one of those genres where if a topic you're not interested in, you just don't want to read it. Which I find is like
Yeah.
interesting than other genres. So I can see why that could be a turnoff, like you said as well.
Yeah, it's almost, well, so to the fantasy thing, like,
Mhm.
for you, I would tell you your way into fantasy should be through fantasy romance, right? Like, I mean,
Mhm.
you already know you like romance, so like, I mean, I'm an alone, I understand. So like, I would tell you like, go read some Kate Daniels, go read some Hidden Legacy, like go read all of that, go read some Nalini Singh, Mila
Mhm.
Vane / Mel Jean Brooks, like go hog wild there and like build your muscles up with getting into a fantasy world with a plot
Mhm.
that you're gonna like.
Mhm.
So like I always tell people like find your way into a new genre with things that you already like.
Yeah.
But then for nonfiction, I almost think of it almost like tropes. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
in romance, like I'm a hard sell on hate to love. I'm a little picky
Mm.
about that. So like I
Okay.
may not go for that trope. And it's the same thing in nonfiction. Like maybe you don't like a historical, historical
Mhm.
nonfiction, but maybe you would really love, this book about science, whatever. Like
Mhm.
you just have to kind of get in there and,
Mhm.
get your hands dirty and
Yeah.
put in the time to find things that do and don't work for you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. Just like speaking from like a dark romance reader perspective, that one is probably the hardest to recommend to people
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of things that would be because some authors don't believe in necessarily putting trigger warnings or content warnings in the beginning of their books. And I've
Yeah.
had heard like different discussions on sometimes Amazon can catch those and flag your book and get it
Oh,
taken down
interesting.
or banned.
Yeah.
So I know like Pam Godwin is one of those authors. So like she hopes that by the cover and like what other readers are saying about it, that's enough for readers.
Hmm.
But I know like for that genre, I can't really recommend unless you're already in that genre and you already love
Yeah.
it. And it's just like how far can you go down this genre? Because I feel like if I recommend a Pam Godwin to someone who only reads historical or contemporary romance, it'd be like, what the hell
Yeah.
is this?
It's a lot.
Like there's underage consent, there's like dubious non-consent, there's like
Yeah.
wild stuff, especially if I bring you to the Katie Roberts side of things or
Oh,
the
well,
Jessica
yeah.
Kane. Like
Yeah.
the Wicked Villain series is
Daddy
a lot
King.
for someone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that stuff is like if you tell me that's in a book, I'll be like, okay, where's this book? You can even lie to me and say it's like in a Brandon Sanders book. I'm like, Brandon Sanderson has like dad kink in this book? Like what? Like hold up.
I mean, I don't know. Have you read much Brandon Sanderson? Because like his writing style with daddy kink is actually hilarious. Like that would be an amazing parodic mashup.
By him. No, 3 books. 3 books
Yeah.
by him, yeah.
Because I feel like his writing tone is so just sort of like wide-eyed, like hero, whatever. So I just like that with the daddy kink is actually pretty hilarious to think about.
He just needs to team up with like Mila Vane.
Yeah,
and they write a series like she can handle all the romance.
Yeah, give him a bloody handy, and he can, world build to his heart's delight.
That's so true. But transitioning us, what are some books that you think across the board you can recommend, either one of the 2 genres, that you think would be a great stepping stone or a great place to start looking?
Let's see here. So for nonfiction, like I said, I think if I didn't know anything about what topics you like, the 2 authors I would recommend are Erik Larson and Michael Lewis, because they just write, their stuff just reads like fiction. So Michael Lewis has more sort of like businessy books, and then he wrote oh God, what's the baseball one? I can't remember it off the top of my head, but he's had several books made into movies. Like it just reads super easy. And then Erik Larson has more like historical kind of stories. So he's had like Devil in the White City I wouldn't necessarily recommend that as audio because, like I said, I think it gets confusing. But I really liked his one, which was about the rise of Hitler. And it was about the American ambassador there at the time and his family. And like they were all super scandalous. So that was interesting. So those are 2 good authors to go to. Or I think of something like Bad Blood that came out 2 years ago now. And that also just reads like fiction. I mean, it's wild stuff. So I think that's pretty safe in terms of very readable stories. I mean, frankly, in this day and age, like there's so many like social justice things that are going on that I would love to push people towards, the new Jim Crow from Michelle Alexander, or I don't know, like Ace by Angela Chen. Like I would encourage people, like I think that's a great way to learn about people in the world is through nonfiction. So, I would push people there, but if I'm trying to just like entice you with some stories, I would go with those other guys.
And how about fantasy? Do you have any? We can do this interesting. We can do one for fantasy for people who come in from a romance background and people from not coming from a romance background.
If you're coming from I mean, again, I'm just so biased, but I would say Alona Andrews is where I would send people, because the world building is so solid, but it's urban fantasy. So like, it's a little easier to get your arms around. It has those long-term couples that are, fun to watch them finally get together. So Kate Daniels or Hidden Legacy. Or I guess I would say Mel Jean Brooke would be my other one for if you're a romance reader. That's Mila Vane's old pen name, and it's like steampunk fantasy series. So they're definitely romances. Like it has a different couple in each book, but again, it's recognizably our world, but with like, I guess it's technically sci-fi, but I think it reads like fantasy. So we'll just go with that. But for non-romance readers, it's hard to say because I tend to like kind of grimmer stuff, and I don't know if I can just tell people like go listen to the Poppy Wars because I know that it's a lot, but
that book's a lot.
It's a lot, but I mean I love that audiobook and I really love that trilogy, but I feel like I can't just unwittingly set that upon people. So I mean, I am a Tolkien stan. I know that's not for everyone. I think I guess I would say if you like classics, I would say Tolkien is a good place for you to go because the writing is pretty high quality. And I've listened to that on audio before, and whoever that narrator was pretty good. C.S. Lewis, those are really good audiobooks. And they actually have some famous actors who've read That, and it's for kids, so that can be maybe. Oh, actually, you know what? That's what I would tell you. Go listen to the Percy Jackson series on audio. It's middle grade. It's fantasy. You don't have to keep like easy breezy. Like you don't have to worry about a ton of like really dense world building. Like start there and see if you can vibe with that, and then maybe branch out from there.
I stand that as a Percy Jackson lover and Rick Riordan fanboy.
Yeah,
I love his books. The only book I feel like it broke my heart that I did not love it was the Trials of Apollo series.
Oh, see, I haven't gotten there yet in my Uncle Rick journey.
I tried the first 2 books like 2 times and I can't get in. Even though it has one of the characters in the second book is from the Heroes of Olympus, and he's one of my favorite characters. I was like, even this is not enough. I was like, what is happening?
I feel like it's devices because I've been told by some people like, oh, that's the worst one, and I know other people love it. So I'm like, I don't know how I'll do once I get there.
I was like, Uncle Rick, you're showing your sign. I know how this series is gonna go. Because if you're doing this like Percy Jackson, the second book is easily the worst book out of the 5 books, and then the third book is like the turning point, and then you said 3, 4, and 5 are where the story really gets good.
Yeah.
I'm like, I was like, if I could just push through, but then I'm like, no, you have like Aru Shah and like his imprint and what they're doing there. I'm like,
yeah.
Roshni Chokshi, I'm probably pronouncing the author's name wrong.
Yeah, it is Roshni, and I always want to say Roshani, and actually I was talking to her and I called her Roshani and I felt terrible, but it's Roshni. Yeah, Roshni Chokshi.
Okay, I was hoping I got that right.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Her Aru Shah series, I think this is better than it rivals Percy Jackson in my mind.
Ooh, well, I've got that one on my shelves. I haven't gotten there yet, but
I immediately pre-ordered the 4th book when it was. I don't think it could be out now. I'm not 100% sure, but it's soon. I think it's soon. We're about to drop. It's a quartet. I love it. Like, I was shocked how much I loved it. I was like,
I have so much more to explore with him. Uncle Rick, his OGs, all of his series, and then I really like Rebecca Roanhorse's spinoff, the Race to the Sun. That was really cute. So yeah, I think middle grade fantasy could be a good way to enter into fantasy audio because you don't have to worry about the world building being as complicated. And I feel like they often have pretty good narrators, and Percy Jackson is really good on audio. Like I was at the edge of my seat the entire time. I was like, I'm just sitting there listening like, I can't listen faster, but I wanted it to go faster because I just wanted it to like get into my head. So yeah.
I 100% agree with that recommendation. As a fan of the Percy Jackson, I am Team Luke forever. Like
that's why you like dark romance. It's all the same.
I'm like telegraphing like my life for like who I gravitate towards.
Yeah.
I was like, I love that. I can't even say like why I love the characters. Everyone would be mad at me that I spoiled it. But the books have been out forever. There's been a movie that was horrible.
Yeah, I like where the character ends up, but I don't like him.
See, I liked it because I was like, oh, I see. Like this is like you're doing like the author who shall not be named, like her kind of like dualism, like with 2 characters who could have had the similar trajectory but took different paths. I was like,
yeah,
I see you, Rick. Like I see you.
But you're like actually inclusive. I mean, have you read the Magnus Chase series?
I have.
Okay, I got told by a lot of people it wasn't that good, and I was like, I really like the series, but I love
they're really good.
He has a trans character in that series, or like a non-binary, I guess, which is debatably trans. Anyway, side note. But
yeah, I think it's because I think the character switches like how her pronoun.
Yeah, like sometimes she's a she and sometimes he's a he.
He, yeah.
But and it's like in their romantic interest, so I'm like, look at you, Uncle Rick, being the anti JKR. Like you're all about, defeating the turfery.
And it's Heroes of Olympus series that has an interracial couple too.
Oh, really?
Asian and Black. Frank and Hazel.
We'd love to see it, Uncle Rick. Come on.
Like he just gives you all the diversity. So like that's a good recommendation. And thank you again, Mara, for coming on my channel. I think we got some solid recommendations. We got a solid roadmap on how to get ourselves into these genres before romance just basically numbs us to any other genre. I feel like if a romance author came out with a book that I liked, I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. fantasy author, I have to go read these books. Because like
Yes.
they're keeping me distracted by releasing like 10 books a year. But
Yeah.
I feel like we got some solid plans, some solid recommendations. So thank you so much, Mara. I'll link all her channel information down below, so you guys can definitely go subscribe to her if you haven't. If you haven't, I don't know what you're doing on BookTube. Like all the content, you can go classics. She is your Nora Roberts.
I read
Anything
it
that you
all.
can think of, like Mara reads it all and
Yeah.
like does such a great job breaking it down. And she's Ruby Dixon trash, which I was like, you are a
Yes.
kindred spirit.
Yes, I have like an hour-long Ruby Dixon. Just like I love this vlog. So
As like my romance heart in me is like, see, this is why I like Mara. Like
yeah,
she can read her like intellectual highbrow literary fiction, and then read just like Presley Cole, Jessica Kane in the same video. I was like, that's like godsend right there.
Yeah, you know what? Like, don't let anybody put you in a box. Read what you want to read. It's just for fun. Well, thank you for having me. It was fun to chat.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you guys so much for watching this video as well. And I'll catch you guys with a brand new video. Bye.
Bye.